Yeah, yeah, yeah. Shark in the gun, got the knowledge for the college. Football show breaks down the odds like scholars. 3-unit bangers, stacking cheddar like flowers. Ride the wave to fame, flex in the midnight hours. 9 words of lifestyle, spitting flames, no pity. Dominate the board like kings, ruling the city. Sports, gamble, and hustle. Money moves so gritty, cashing tickets every Friday. Life looking pretty, ride the wave. Feel the rush, hit the dame. Shark in the gun, setting fire to the name. 3-unit banging, stacking chips, no shame. Friday night sports kings claiming that fame. Analyze stats, break bread, no sweat. 3-point spreads, risk life, major bet. Cash in pockets, feel.
On a suddenly not so casual free Friday in September, it is CFB Knowledge for College Week 5, September 27th, 2024. The Shark and the Gun right here live on Sharky Waters Nation, X, and YouTube. Jump in the chat, YouTube and X. I think the chat is one in the same now. We hope you guys are having a great Friday night. Guns Picks, what's going on, brother?
Theme of this show this week in week 5, because we have a little bit of statistics. I call this the Pound of Flesh show. You know why? A lot of revenge spots this week. It's going to be a very good card. There's a lot of plays that we like. I can't wait to break it down with you all. Get into the chat. Tell me what you're on, what you're drinking, what you're smoking, and what you are going to be playing on this beautiful Saturday. Shark, let's get into the card, baby.
12 o'clock, big-time football in Indiana, Bloomington, Indiana. The Hoosiers running one of their best campaigns in years. The home opener in the Big Ten, a collaboration official, Indiana, -6.5, -7.
That's right. The collab is back. The college football knowledge for college collab. And I can't wait to talk about this one. Maryland versus Indiana, Memorial Stadium, Bloomington, Indiana. 12 p.m. East is the kick. And we got an Indiana team that is cooking right now. 4-0 in the year, dominating their competition, by the way. Plus 42-point differential, plus 315 net yard average for the year. And they're going against a Maryland team that's 3-1 on the year, winning the yardage battle in 3 out of their 4 games so far, plus 18-point differential, plus 113 net yard average. But what Maryland wants to do, they want to pass the ball. They average 309 yards per game passing with Billy Edwards, 75% completion rate, 8 touchdowns, 2 INTs on the year. And Maryland has yet to face a defense like Indiana because Indiana is ranked 10th in opposing passing yards per game and 16th in opposing passing yards per play, only giving up 5.1 yards per attempt. So this Maryland team is going to be tested on Saturday at noon. And then Indiana is also good versus the run. This is signature Curt Cignetti from JMU coming over to the Hoosiers defense, 2.6 yards per carry, giving up to opponents 75 rushing yards per game. And this is not a 1, not a 2, but a 3x revenge spot here for Indiana. Their recent loss last year was on the road, 44-17, absolutely embarrassed, where they were a 14.5-point dog in that game. And now you see the line completely shift to the other side for Indiana, making them a 6.5, 7-point favorite currently. And then you have Maryland, 3-11 as a dog versus conference opponents dating back to 2021, 1-9 ATS as a single-digit dog versus conference opponents. And the home team in this situation, when these two teams meet, 6-2 straight up, 7-1 ATS. Last 8 meetings between these two beautiful franchises. This is a big step up in class for Maryland. You've been playing a lot of garbage teams here for the Terrapins. Second road game of the year, by the way. And, of course, we talk about the god, the gift, the GOAT himself, head coach Curt Cignetti, has really turned this Hoosier program around, bringing in a lot of JMU talent. This is not your father's Hoosier team, folks. We are back in this team here in a beautiful spot. Give me Indiana -7 as the play.
Complete alignment. Saturday afternoon it will be. Let me jump off that commentary on the coach. We backed JMU last year relentlessly. Guns has been on Indiana multiple times this year. I have awakened into the lights, and a suddenly not so casual Saturday it will be. Kurt's talking about it. I'll tell you what he said. He's talking to his team. You guys are 4-0. You've been lighting everybody on fire. Stay humble, stay hungry, stay focused. And one thing I found to be very interesting, quarterback for Maryland, Edwards, a junior, was actually recruited Signetti was on record saying he had that kid in his office numerous times with his parents at James Madison. So I think a nice little point there as to how they will be able to scheme against this Maryland quarterback. And speaking of Maryland, this is not Maryland from last year with Tua Tagovailoa's little brother at the helm. This is a far more pedestrian team. You go through their statistics here very briefly, as Guns mentioned. 2-2 ATS, 3-1 straight up. I have written down here, very pedestrian. Home blowout of UConn. You want to buy UConn at home? Slight forecasting to play on the broadcast here. But UConn on the road, an absolute gas can. And last week, a non-cover against FCS Villanova. And in between that, two very pedestrian efforts against Michigan State and UVA. And as Guns mentioned, last year, a blowout win by Maryland in College Park, 44-17, line shifting significantly. We expect a double-digit victory from Indiana, 12 noon, high noon, national TV. Buy it, live it, love it, and let's dominate. The Gun is wearing a beautiful print. It is a buy hat. It is his first exclusive official of the broadcast. Kansas State at noon in Big 12 play, -4.5.
I told you this was pound of flesh themed here. We got another one here cooking with Oklahoma State and Kansas State. Bill Snyder Family Stadium, 12 p.m. kick. Oklahoma State coming off a 3-point loss, heartbreaking loss at home versus Utah last game, only putting up 285 yards of total offense. They are 3-1 on the year, plus 16-point differential, -12 net yard average, though. And then we have this Kansas State team, and you know what happened to them. We took BYU for a reason. I said sprinkle on the money line because BYU put a whooping on Kansas State in Provo. And they lost 38-9, put up 367 yards of total offense and allowed 241 to BYU, plus 126 net yards in the game. What? And they lost 38-9. Well, I'll get to that in a second. Last game was just a bad spot for Kansas State. They came off that big win versus Arizona, and that was a pound of flesh game in that spot. Brutalized them and dominated them on that Friday night, and had this game on deck. This was a revenge spot for them. They were caught in the mega sandwich. This is why we took BYU. Look at the box score, though, in this game. A little bit misleading. Kansas State going in nearly going into the half was up 6-3. But Kansas State proceeded to give up a fumble, which was returned for a touchdown, threw an INT in the next possession that resulted in a BYU touchdown, 2 touchdowns in a little bit over a minute to end the half. Then Kansas State started their first possession in the second half, throwing another turnover INT that resulted in a BYU touchdown. Then the next possession, they had to punt. And what happened in that punt? Probably the greatest punt return in college football history. He ran 200 yards in a circle and got into the end zone. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. 28 points that were decided off either turnovers or by a punt return. Unbelievable type situational spot there. And then Kansas State is just a much better team at home. If you look at their statistics at home, they have a plus 29 point differential, plus 191 net yard average at home this season. And if you think it's a fluke, go back and look at what happened in 2023. Plus 28 point differential, plus 172 net yard average in 2023 at home. So this is a consistent home team for KSU. And then look at KSU, 13-2 against the spread as a home favorite dating back to 2022, 11-2 ATS as a home favorite versus conference opponents. And I said pound of flesh, revenge game. They lost to Oklahoma 29-21 at Stillwater last year. Oklahoma State won that game with 5 field goals, a rushing touchdown, and an interception return for a touchdown. Outliers all over the place. And of course, the home team 5-1, straight up 6-0 ATS. In the last 6 meetings with these two teams, this is just a perfect bounce back spot for Kansas State. They are hurting after that egregious loss on the road. Now they get the revenge spot versus a ranked opponent in the Cowboys. I think the misleading outcome was last week, like I said, plus over 100 net yards in that game. So they dominated the yardage battle and still lost 38-9. The success of them at home. We're going Kansas State, baby. I got it at -4.5. I think the 5s and the 5.5s are hitting right now, but Kansas State is going to win this one by 2 scores. Kansas State -4.5 is my play.
Yeah, I saw Kelly in Vegas, a notable alumni, talking trash on her team this week. And this kind of reminds me of what we say oftentimes. When fans and alumni get down on their team, buy. When fans and alumni get high on their team, sell. So we love you, Kelly. We hope you get the K-State win this week, although I think it's contrary to your bank account. But that is the life we live as sports bettors. My first play. A single play, excuse me. Taking Navy on the road at 12 o'clock in Birmingham, Alabama, -3.5. And when I started to go through this, I noticed Navy looks damn hot this year. 3-0 straight up, 2-1 ATS, only non-cover, a backdoor in week 1 against FCS Bucknell. Bucknell late touchdown to cover that. Probably shouldn't have. So they should be 3-0 ATS. But if you really start to look at the margin that's being created, this Navy team with their rushing attack has been absolutely dominant, outscoring their opponents in weeks 1 through 3 by 67 points, putting up 922 rush yards. That is 307 yards per game. I started looking at UAB, and I had to remind myself how much I used to love UAB with ex-quarterback Dylan Hopkins, now on New Mexico, I believe, and Dwayne McBride, 7th-round pick from the Vikings last year, not in football right now, unfortunately, but that was 2 years ago. And this UAB team has really fallen off the grid in recent history with senior quarterback Jacob Zeno going 4-10 straight up in their last 14. 2 of those wins against FCS opponents, sustainably very poor. Look at this season. Only home cover against Alcorn State. RIP to Steve McNair. We love you up in the sky, but that was not an impressive home victory for UAB this year in week 1, 41-3. Went on the road in week 2 and got absolutely shellacked at ULM, 32-6 at a 10.5 favorite point. And most recently, pre-bye in week 3 at SEC Arkansas, actually coming off a high here, 37-27 cover. I think the key point, going back to the run game, UAB's rushing defense has been terrible this year, giving up 209 yards to ULM and 266 yards to Arkansas. This is that perfect merge of stylistic football. One team plays great in one spot. One team plays terrible where the other team plays great. This is where Navy should be able to absolutely dominate this game. And final point on the game. First time these teams had ever played last year. It was actually a home game for Navy in Annapolis, 31-6. Navy. Key point of the line, -3.5 UAB. UAB favored on the road, very similar rosters, should come up to a touchdown favorite at home. This is coming across. Navy opens at -4, suggesting Navy to win the game by 10 to 14 points. Official play, taking Navy on the road at 12, -3.5. Staying at 12, staying small market football. We mentioned UConn before. We are going to Storrs, Connecticut. UConn, a home favorite again. This team really catching significant sustained momentum as a home team, and the gun is buying it at -5.5.
Yeah. Well, you want to play in the mud? Let's play in the mud. We got Buffalo versus Connecticut here at noon, East Hartford, Connecticut at Pratt & Whitney Stadium. It'll be thumping there for the Huskies. Listen, Buffalo coming off a nice little win for themselves. I'll get to that in a second. They're 3-1 on the year with a -56 net yard average plus 3-point differential overall. And then you got a UConn team that's 2-2 on the year with a +56 net yard average plus 8-point differential. But you have a Buffalo team in that 3-1. Here are their wins. Lafayette, FCS opponent that is not even in the top 25 in the FCS rankings. UMass, currently ranked 132nd in the country. Only Akron and Kent State are worse. And then, of course, last week, Northern Illinois in the worst situational spot ever, coming off the bye after a historical upset over my Irish. That hurt. And a look ahead with NC State this week. So it was a bad spot for them altogether. Then you have Buffalo beat a ranked opponent in NIU last week, 23-20, only putting up 184 yards of total offense in that game, -175 net yards for the game. Looking at the box score in that game, they shouldn't have won. NIU had the ball in Buffalo territory 11 out of 14 times. I did not stutter. 11 out of 14 times and failed to score 4 of those possessions due to a missed field goal, end of the half, interception, and missed the game-tying field goal at end of regulation. That was the deciding factor in that. And then you have UConn's strength is running the football. They averaged 242 rushing yards per game, 5.6 yards per carry on the season. Throwing out the games with Lafayette, if we're looking at the Buffalo defensive side, and UMass, of course, I told you, FCS opponent, bad UMass team. Buffalo gives up 5.1 yards per carry on the ground in the ground game, all of them on the road. And then while UConn is not the greatest historically as a home favorite, 5-13 ATS as a home favorite dating back to 2014, they are actually on a 5-1 ATS home streak as a favorite, including 2-0 this season. So sometimes trends tell you one thing, then you got to dig a little bit deeper and realize, no. This team is actually better than the teams in the past. I just love fading teams, especially double-digit dogs coming off an outright win. The box score tells you that Buffalo should have lost that game. They played absolutely awful, but NIU beat themselves, and Buffalo got the victory because of it. UConn should be ready for this one and has already shown to excel as a favorite in home situations. So UConn is the play, -5.5.
Yeah, it really is a great spot to fade Buffalo coming off a huge in-conference win in the MAC last week. The Gun in stores at noon, -5.5. Moving to 3:30, Big 12 football, buying low on a team we have bought now for years, bought incorrectly last week, but we really need to have a conversation about this team. That team is the Kansas Jayhawks, buying them on the money line, -125, 1 unit. First thing I saw when I looked at this game is actually being played at Arrowhead Stadium. So this is going to be a massive crowd for the home team, and they need it at this point. This team is 0-4 ATS on the year after starting ranked with fifth-year senior Jalen Daniels. 0-3 straight up last 3, coming in here on really an egregious 3-game losing streak. Took a loss on the road in week 2 to Illinois, outgained them, had a big lead, turnovers killed them. Let it be. Illinois is pretty scrappy. That's okay. Home game against UNLV, same story. 17-6 early lead, blow the game, totally outgained UNLV. And last week, I think, really was the bottom out point. Playing at West Virginia last week, 28-17 Kansas at the 5:39 mark of the fourth quarter. You should not be losing that football game. West Virginia, 2 touchdowns in the last 3:27 of the fourth quarter after a lightning delay as well. Very disruptive to the flow if you're in the lead in a football game. This is where this team has to bounce back. The quotes are good. We love the coach, Lance Leipold. It's a veteran roster. Some of the quotes coming out from the players saying, when we came here 4 or 5 years ago, we were terrible. We know how this feels. It pisses us off immensely. We will bounce back. And it's really a great spot to bounce back against TCU, who is 0-4 ATS themselves, but not in the same context of being close, more so being very, very mediocre. Non-cover road week 1 at Stanford. Didn't cover a game by a hook against LIU. That is Long Island University. For those of you guys out there hanging out in the island. A backdoor in week 3 at home against UCF. And really an obliteration last week at SMU. Giving up 66 points. 66-42 SMU. And as is the major theme of this broadcast in week 5, we're buying teams in conference who have gotten dominated by the opponent in recent years. TCU is 4-0 straight up against Kansas last 2, but Kansas is closing the gap. Go back through those 4 losses, 37-point loss, 36, 3, 7, and now Kansas favored against TCU for the first time as far back as I can remember. This is heavy line strength. It's a great buy low. It's a great sell high of the TCU domination of Kansas. and it is an official play at 3:30 in Arrowhead. Use that Mahomes energy, gentlemen. Let's dominate. Staying at 3:30, the Gun taking his probably favorite team, as far as I know, of the planet on Saturday. 3:30, Notre Dame at home. 4.5 over the weekend. 6.5 now. Guns picks unofficial.
Let me just let me get situated here. I gotta throw this on. Listen, I don't like betting on my team, but this is the game that I circled last year that I knew this was going to be on the schedule. Okay, I've had this bet for a while. I went to the look ahead. I got the best line, and it's working in my favor. But let's talk about this game: Louisville versus Notre Dame. Notre Dame Stadium, South Bend, Indiana, and 3:30 is the kick. And South Bend's going to be rocking with a bunch of old retired doctors, Irish Catholic drunks, and the student section, of course. And we have Louisville coming off a 31-19 win over Georgia Tech. Last game, despite losing the net yardage battle, minus 84 net yards. I believe they had 2 touchdowns defensively off turnovers, which was a deciding factor in the game. Not only the spread, but also straight up. And then you have Notre Dame coming off a 23-3 win. Kind of played flat in that game, probably looking too far ahead. They holding Miami, Ohio to 229 yards of total offense, plus 199 net yards for the game. Now, Louisville looked good in their first 2 games, but those opponents were Austin Peay and Jacksonville State. Okay? When they faced Georgia Tech, they came back to earth, only putting up 326 yards of total offense, 2.1 yards per carry on the ground, and 269 passing yards. Then you have a Notre Dame team, the best defense that Louisville has seen all year. And that's easily standing out on the schedule. They hold their opponents at 3.6 yards per carry on the ground, 42.7 pass completion rate to opponents, and 135 yards per game. These 2 teams met 2023, pound of flesh game once again. They lost 33-20. The key to that win was plus 4 turnover ratio in favor of Louisville. But you got to look at the scenario. Go back to 2023 for a second. They had a super sandwich in that game. Notre Dame coming off a close win on the road to Duke against their former DC, Mike Elko. They needed a Audric Estime touchdown. I think it was roughly 50-yard touchdown run to get over the hump. And of course, they had a defensive stop at the end of the game. Actually hurt the quarterback, Riley Leonard, ironically enough, playing in this game as the quarterback for Notre Dame. And then who did they have next? USC at home. And what happened against USC? Pound of flesh game. They dominated USC, beating them by 21 points. Then you got to look at ND. Let's go situational trends here. 17-4 ATS is a single-digit favorite date back to 2018. And then, of course, Louisville 4-12-1 ATS as an away dog dating back to 2018. Notre Dame is the better team here. I think they win by double digits. And then you got the pound of flesh element there. This is one that I know Marcus Freeman underlined 100 times, broke pens, broke pencils. This is the game they wanted all season long. I know they got USC at the end of the year. That's probably another one they want. But this is the game that they want the most. And you're getting them as a single-digit favorite at home. Notre Dame is going to dominate this game. I know it. I've seen it before. We saw it with USC last year. They're going to do it again here to a Louisville team that is not banged up with the running backs. Their corner secondary is banged up. That is trouble for a Notre Dame team that can run on you, they can pass on you, and once they got kicked in the mouth by Northern Illinois, they're not going to take any opponent lightly on the rest of the schedule, and they need this game to stay in contention to the college football playoff. Give me Notre Dame, minus 4.5, minus 6, minus 10, whatever the number is, and that's the play.
Absolutely love it. The buy hat is engaged. Guns picks. Taking Notre Dame. Take notice of that. My next play, another buy low in conference. Taking Duke at home, 4 o'clock in Durham, minus 2.5, 1 unit. This conversation has to begin with North Carolina. And the Gun and I were actually debating this before the show in terms of if this is a bounce back, if this was an inspirational spot for UNC. And you guys who have watched us now for years know that the bounce back in sports, collegiate and professional, is one of the most interesting conversations because a lot of people like to buy streaks and a lot of people like to fade streaks, and there's not a lot of middle ground. It's more or less going one way or the other, and it's indefinite in those directions. And I try to middle it. And when I was looking at the psychology of this, I think Mac Brown is so far over the hill from a standpoint of being a high-class D1A college football coach. And you saw it last week. He's got a third-string quarterback, this kid Jacoby Criswell. He started the season with an elite transfer from Texas A&M. This is the third quarterback of the year already. The team came out and gave up 53 points to JMU. In my opinion, that is not correctable. That is so unbelievably egregious that it speaks to just a zero mentality of the group. And then when Mac Brown comes out and says he's thinking about resigning, that's not inspirational. That's not, hey, guys, I'm behind you. That says, I'm giving up. And I think that's what you're going to see here. And I think even more importantly within this matchup, of course, these teams highly noted for being rivals in state, more so in basketball over the years. But here we are in football, 2024. North Carolina's beaten them 5 in a row. This is my third play of the broadcast where a team in conference has owned one team for years and is now an underdog. Take notice of that. And I think if you really go through UNC in the past decade, this is the first time they're not playing with what you could probably call a blue chip quarterback. Even though some of these guys didn't translate to the NFL, they were great in college. Mitchell Trubisky, Sam Howell, and most recently, Drake May. And speaking of Drake May, last year did not cover against Duke, 47-45 in double overtime. Huge line shift. UNC at home, 10.5. Underdog here for the first time literally in 6 or 7 years, I believe. And you talk about closing the gap, as I mentioned, with the Jayhawks Horned Frog take. Let's very similar stuff here. Last 4 matchups. UNC, 32-point win, 31-point win, 3-point win, 2-point win. You got Manny Diaz over here. Guns doesn't like Manny. I don't know about the quarterback transfer from Texas. I know I like it, and I am buying it. Take Duke at 4 o'clock, -2.5. Going back to the gun, smaller market Sun Belt traveling to SEC, 7:45 p.m. South Alabama, a well-known out-of-conference underdog take for a few years now, and the gun buying into that, +21.5.
Yeah, I look how these teams are set up statistically. I could not ignore the South Alabama Jaguars team. They're going to be playing LSU Tigers in Tiger Stadium, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 7:45 p.m. is the kick. And then we have South Alabama coming off a dominating, and I mean dominating performance against App State, 48-14, putting up 474 yards of total offense, 320 rushing yards, and +89 net yards for the game. And then you have LSU coming off a 34-17 lackluster win versus UCLA, +159 net yard average for the game. They are now 3-1 on the year with a +9 point differential. Then you have South Alabama. They're 2-2 on the year. They lost to North Texas and they lost to Ohio. Yes, some bad losses, especially the Ohio loss. They have won the yardage battle in 3 out of the 4 games this year. But you got to look at that loss to Ohio. It did look bad. However, the reason why they lost that game is their star quarterback, Gio Lopez, did not play in that game. And he is a threat not only in the passing game, but in the running game. And that was the deciding factor in that. And of course, Gio Lopez stats this season, if you want to go dig deep, 8.1 yards per carry on the ground rushing, 62% pass completion rate, 9.2 yards per attempt passing, 9 touchdowns, and 0 INTs. This is an elite quarterback we need to pay attention to moving forward. South Alabama wants to establish the run game. That is their bread and butter as far as their offense is concerned, especially with Major Applewhite running the helm. They average 6.9 yards per carry on the ground game and can beat you with multiple rushing weapons, including, let's get some college football names, shall we? Fluff Bothwell, their leading rusher, 9.7 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns. Kentrell Bullock, 6.8 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. And of course, Gio Lopez, the third leading rusher, and PJ Martin is an elite running back as well, 9.6 yards per carry, 1 touchdown. They can beat you with multiple weapons in that offense. Then you got LSU. They've had some success stopping the run, 3.8 yards per carry. I'll give them that. But look at the teams they faced so far. USC, pass-oriented team. They don't like running the ball. Nicholls State, FCS opponent that had won 3 games in 2023. South Carolina, a run-first offense, great run-first offense. And guess what South Carolina did to them? Put up 243 yards rushing, 5.9 yards per carry. And then, of course, they went against UCLA, a team that is in shambles. Chip Kelly leaving the program, and they just in complete disarray. They only have 2.7 yards per carry on average this season rushing the football. So, like I said, stats are misleading sometimes. Go look back to see what teams they've played. And then you have South Alabama. This is not an unfamiliar spot for them. They love playing against ranked opponents. They love playing against the P4, P5 teams. Look what they've done. 2023, they beat Oklahoma State outright, 33-7 as 7-point dogs. In 2022, they lost to UCLA 32-21, narrowest of margins. However, they were 15-point dogs in that game. So historically, this team can perform against the elite levels in college football. And I'm not saying LSU is elite, obviously. I think they're average to below average at best. LSU is in a possible trap spot as well as they going into their bye week. And guess who they have up next? Ole Miss in a revenge spot after the bye. They are overlooking this team, in my opinion. South Alabama is also 12-6 ATS as a double-digit dog in the last 5 seasons. And like I said, I'm not a Brian Kelly fan. I hate him. I'm glad he left Notre Dame. He put the program in a better position when he went to LSU, and I love watching him fail at the Tigers. My opinion. He's 0-4 ATS this season already in the first 4 games, only beaten Nicholls State by 23 when they were 45-point favorites, barely beaten South Carolina. It took a late missed field goal and a late touchdown by LSU to beat them, and then struggled against one of the worst teams in the Big Ten in UCLA. They were tied at halftime to UCLA. All right, this is not a good LSU team at all. South Alabama is going to be super, and I mean super motivated to play here. The past 2 years with Major Applewhite running that offense, and now he's the head coach of the team. South Alabama's offense is too good, and they may not win the game, but they are going to stay with this LSU team, and that's why I'm going to be taking them here. South Alabama plus 21.5 as the play.
Absolutely love it. My next play, going back to 4 o'clock, going back to a spot we did buy correctly 2 weeks ago in Greenville, North Carolina, American Athletic Conference, East Carolina in the first half, -2.5, and the game -3. First thing, like I always talk about when we take these first halves, look at the split. The game is -3. The first half is -2.5. The books are telling you immense strength in the first half. And ECU is 4-0 ATS in the first half, both road and home. Go back to that game 2 weeks ago against App State. They did melt the game, but they did come out with a 16-0 first quarter and hold on to cover in the second quarter. So when I was originally looking at this, I was thinking, okay, we're just taking the first half. But then I started to look at UTSA, and I started to look at their quarterback situation. Transfer quarterback Owen McCown coming from Colorado the past couple years. This is his 6th career road start for either Colorado or UTSA. His point differential in the previous 5 is -184. That's -37 points per game. And even more importantly, in the first half of those games, -132, -26.4 points per game in the first half. And I was looking at this kid, trying to psychoanalyze him from his picture. And you guys know I'm never throwing shade at anybody from psychoanalysis. It's purely personality types. He's not a big, fiery personality. So when he comes out on the road and he's leading a group in the huddle, the group does not rally around him. And you saw this in week 2 at Texas State, just an obliteration, 49-10 loss. Another one the following week in Texas Longhorns, that is, 56-7. And you go to this matchup specifically, This is the second consecutive year these teams have played. Go back to the last time these teams played, and it brought me back to the last few seasons we were on this show. We used to like UTSA. Frank Harris, good running game, senior quarterback, good mentality. Last year, UTSA, October 28th, 2023, favored by 17.5 points at home against ECU. Now they come across at plus 3.5. That's a 21-point gap. It speaks to immense strength for ECU. As I said, UTSA has been not representative on the road at all. By this one, I see it coming early and often. ECU first half -2.5 and game -3. I want to throw it to the gun before I close out with my last play. We want to talk about a total that neither of us have actually bet yet, but one that we love, and I think we're really developing an affection towards here. Air Force at Wyoming. The under opened at 36.5. Two teams that are truly incapable of scoring the football this year. Steamed down already from 36.5 to 33.5. And I like it. Guns, do you agree?
Yeah. I mean, these teams can't score. I mean, of course, Air Force was a great team in the past couple of years, but they're in shambles right now. I think they brought 2 returning starters back on that offense. Their quarterback's not good. They're very green. Of course, they run the triple option, so they're just clock chewing. This is a clock chewing team. They scored 21 against Merrimack, this Air Force team. They scored 7 against San Jose State. They scored 3 against Baylor. And then on the other side, when you look at Wyoming, what did they score? 7, 13, 14, and 17. So these are 2 low-scoring teams. Of course, Wyoming 0-4. And then you have Air Force that's 1-2 on the year, but they only beat an FCS school. Yeah, the total can't be low enough here. I don't know. I mean, like you said, it's in the 30s. I mean, that's like equivalent to say that Notre Dame versus Louisville is going to be a 70-point total. Okay, it's just I don't see this team ever going over this at all. Granted, you could take the caveat that Wyoming's defense just gives up a ton of yards. They're giving up 429 yards per game. They gave up 534 to North Texas, but really offensively, Air Force is unthreatening. They only average 217 yards per game and all they do is they're one-dimensional. They run the ball. So yeah, I mean, if I had a lean to this one, there's no way I'm going to take an over in this game. Of course, there's also a look ahead with Air Force. They got Navy next week, I believe. Yeah, they got Navy next week. So we may hit back-to-back unders on this one because military unders, historically have been cashing it, not as of late. But in this case, under a pass for me.
Yeah, without question. And as Guns mentioned, neither of these teams can score at all. And this really goes to a conversational point of this show, week 5. These are just teams that lost a lot of players. And Air Force lost most of their principal talent on the offensive side. Quarterback, not only their first running back, their second running back. This team is gutted. And Wyoming is also gutted. And really, final point on this, if you go back to last year, these teams did play a game at 34-27. That's 61 points last year with a totally different unit. And as I mentioned with Navy, when I talked about Navy -3.5, oftentimes you would see in recent years Air Force rushing attack being fantastic. So this is really the polar opposite from what we're used to. We think this is a great under. Now steamed down to 33.5. As our guy on Sunday says, Anthony Latino, the odds fellow, when they go low, I go lower. We love that one. And just want to have a conversational point on that. If we go official, we'll be dropping it tomorrow. My final official of the broadcast, 8 o'clock in Lubbock, Texas. Going back to a spot we did back correctly last week, taking Texas Tech at home again for the 3rd straight week. First half -2.5. And this is very similar to what I said about the other first half spot. You have to look at the line proportion. First half -2.5. Game -3.5. And with this quarterback, Bayron Morton, as I said last week, this guy has been an absolute unit at home for 3 seasons now. Texas Tech has switched quarterbacks 3 or 4 times. But if this kid, even dating back to, I believe, his sophomore season, was playing a home game, they come out blazing hot. And they are 2-0 in the first half, last 2 at home, a blowout of North Texas 2 weeks ago, and another convincing cover last week. And I think this is a great spot to fade Cincinnati. Cincinnati, uncannily, in their second season here in the Big 12, are 4-0 ATS in the first half. So if you're going to buy, you buy. But what you're looking at here is 3 of those covers are at home. It's only their second road game. And last week, they did come out and just smash Houston at home in the first half, 24-0. So you talk about the law of averages quickly reversing in complete, utter polarization. This is where it should come the direction of Texas Tech again. And final point on this, as I mentioned, only one road game this year. They did cover the first half at Miami of Ohio, but it wasn't nearly as impressive as these home blowouts. Miami of Ohio, on the opening drive in that game, threw an interception at the Cincinnati 21-yard line. So we probably should have gotten some points there. And slightly later on, I actually did a double take when I saw this. This is classic MAC football. Miami of Ohio went for it on 4th and 4 on their own 19-yard line in the second quarter in a one-possession game.
Wow.
And they fumbled, and it was returned to the 3-yard line, and Cincinnati scored on the very next play, and that was the result of the first half. That touchdown is what brought them to the first half cover. I don't think Texas Tech is going to be going for it on 4th and 4 from their 19 in the second quarter. Basically a gift from Miami of Ohio for Cincinnati to cover on the road in the first half. Love the split, love Bayron Morton at home, and love fading Cincinnati at a 4-0 first half ATS clip. Buy this one in the first half, -2.5. 43 minutes in the book. CFB Knowledge for College Week 5, the Shark and the Gun. We appreciate you guys immensely taking your time out of your Friday night to spend with us as we dive into the details of college football. I have 7 top plays. Indiana -6.5 at noon. That is FanDuel line at 6.5. Navy -3.5. Kansas -125. Duke -2.5. ECU first half -2.5. Game -3. And Texas Tech -2.5. Guns Picks and I alignment play at noon. Indiana -6.5. The Gun with 2 other noon plays. Kansas State -4.5 and UConn -5.5. Big time stuff in South Bend. The buy hat is engaged -4.5 over the weekend. 6.5 now. And South Alabama at 7:45 +21.5. Have a beautiful night. We'll be on here Sunday morning at 10 or 10:30. Full NFL card, same energy. It's almost October. It is time to dominate. Guns Picks, a pleasure as always. Closing out with some words, and let's go.
Yeah, I just want to say, in the words of Razor Sharp, shout out to the chat as Kelly Vincenzo, JL Smith, Wacky Wizard, Peter Grazia, LVCC, and Sox Nation always joining the chat, and everybody else. Bob the Candyman can back in the chat. Haven't seen you in a bit, but that's gonna do it here for the show. Knowledge for College, and make sure you check me out on Saturday mornings with Guns Picks, 11 a.m. East. We break down the top 25, and hell, we may even give you some extra plays. Of course, I'm going to be joined with Pimp Slap himself, Mikey and Connor Mack Picks, and special guest Mark Zinno from Wager Talk is going to be on the show as well. So please go check that out. 11 a.m. East, Saturday mornings with Guns Picks. That's going to do it here for the show. We will see you. I will see you tomorrow. And of course, check us out Sunday, 10 a.m. for the NFL breakdown. We have what I call the Mona Lisa of breakdowns of capping on that show. So you got to wait and go check that out on Saturday morning. But let's cash some tickets. Let's dominate the bowl. And as always, let's keep dancing. Yeah, bang.